Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final session, the final keynote address. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Carol Ptak and Dick Ling. Carol is currently a partner with the DemandDriven Institute and was most recently at Pacific Lutheran University as a visiting professor and distinguished executive in residence. Previously, she was the Vice President and Global Industry Executive for Manufacturing and Distribution Industries at PeopleSoft, where she developed the concept of demand-driven manufacturing. Prior to that, she spent 4 years at the IBM Corporation. She is an author of numerous articles and books, many of them on the new demand-driven materials requirements planning. Dick Ling is recognized as the creator of sales and operations planning and well regarded as an educator, speaker, and consultant. He co-authored the first book on sales and operations planning. And after graduating from the University of Rochester, Dick joined IBM, where he gained valuable experience helping manufacturing companies utilize the computer. The most notable of these was Wilmot Castle Company in the early 60s, when Dick helped them implement time-phased and level-by-level requirements planning before it was even called MLP. He and his staff developed MLP software with the first master scheduling capabilities. Dick and Carol are going to take us through the Adaptive S&OP, the strategic component of the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model. Adaptive sales and operations planning is the integrated business process that provides management the ability to strategically define, direct, and manage relevant information in the strategic relevant range and across the enterprise. So, Carol, over to you.
Thanks so much, Ken. I just wanted to open with a couple comments about how thrilled we are that we can be presenting here in South Africa and what great memories Dick and I both have of South Africa. And what an honor it is for me to have been able to work with Dick the last few years. Chad and I created DemandDriven and DMRP that many people know well, but very quickly we realized that it was only part of a much bigger framework. So I'm very excited that I've had that opportunity, to work with really a hero of mine, a living legend. Most people alive today, don't never think of a time where there wasn't a computer, or there wasn't SNOP or a master schedule. And we have Dick to thank for all of those innovations. So it's with my greatest pleasure, I'll turn the first part of this presentation over to Dick. So Dick, to you.
Well, thank you, Carol. Yes, it's a pleasure being here. I think it's ironic that SNOP was created in 1984, and 1984 was the year I actually traveled to South Africa and ran some classes for Oliver White. And a little note was that I took some cash with me, and I bought my wife a diamond that I couldn't afford when we got married 25 years previous to that. So I have very fond memories of being in South Africa. Well, let's get to the topic. Why was SNOP created in 84? Well, many companies were operating with a very silo mentality. Adequate collaboration did not exist in many companies. The annual business plan was once a year event and was typically not done very well. And management was not really managing and driving the planning process properly. And the problem was there wasn't definition and process that described how to do integrated planning in a company. If we started talking about what's going on in manufacturing, this is the plumbing chart that what I would have used in those classes I taught in 1984 before we introduced SNOP. And we've been working on it for quite some time. I got involved with material requirements planning in 1961, developed the first master scheduling software in 1971, and here was 1984. And we still hadn't completed the process. But we finally came up with a need for having a sales and operations planning process which sits above the detailed master schedule and forecast and is below the business plan, and it's what really ties together the new product plan, the aggregate sales plan, financial plan, and supply plan into one integrated process. So that was done in 1984. What was our vision? Well, we wanted to engage management in the process better than I had been previously. We wanted to make sure that everybody had the necessary information to support the process. And what is that information? We want to provide a monthly planning horizon that goes out far enough to also help with the annual business planning process. And beyond the numbers, we wanted to have the documented assumptions to support the numbers. We'll talk more about that later. We wanted to ensure that there was a cross-functional collaboration among all the departments in the company. So the definition we came up with sales and operations planning is where we come up with an integrated set of plans. It's done at least once a month. Senior management's involved at the product family level. We need to reconcile all supply, demand, and new product planning at both detail and aggregate. So we need to go out at least 18 months in the future, maybe longer, depending on lead times and how far you have to plan to launch new product and plan your future. But it was very slow to be adopted. I was very disappointed by that. We wrote the first book in 1988, so see, it took 4 years to get a book out after we introduced the process. SAPICS initially ignored SNOP. No software company supported it. Academia wasn't aboard at all. They didn't come up with it, so they really didn't want to support it. And initially, a lot of people thought of it as merely a demand-supply balancing situation. I spoke every year at SAPICS on SNOP. There were not many speakers on the topic, but they started coming aboard as we got into the 90s. So what happened was SNOP began to be accepted in the 90s. SAPICS added it to the dictionary. Articles and books began to emerge. Other people started writing about it. Because software companies were still pushing ERP, they did not have a way to really support the SNOP process. Most companies utilized Excel spreadsheets, the only way they could get the information. So it's potentially still misunderstood by many people, many companies. And SNOP was removed from SAPICS dictionary because some people thought that production planning and SNOP were the same thing. I had to introduce SNOP as a new and emerging term in the mid-90s. I focused all my energy in helping clients implement SNOP successfully. Well, what was my formula for success? I felt we had to educate all the players as a team, get everybody in the same room, hear the same message, and have a kickoff where everybody recognized what the company was going to do with sales and operations planning. The general manager had to be in attendance or no education. I was very adamant about that. We just wouldn't schedule a session if the general manager couldn't be available. Because SNOP is first and foremost a leadership issue. We recommended that everyone implement a pilot as soon as possible, and everybody did. We decided that it made most sense to have a learn by doing approach. I had one company in California that we had the education, and the general manager said, well, when can we do this? And people were saying, well, maybe 2 or 3 months. He said, no, let's do it next month. Even if we do one product family, we'll get started. They got started and they were very successful. Made sure we implemented documented assumptions throughout the process. That's absolutely crucial. Without that, SNOP is going to be a very limp system. And then we utilized a continuous self-improvement approach by using self-assessment. Absolutely critical. I can't come in and do it every month, but the company itself can do a self-assessment and decide how well are we doing with this whole process. I started running classes with Andy Koldrick in Europe in 1995, and we decided that we had to show this a little bit differently, as opposed to a hierarchical process. We said it's more of a flow. These things have to be in place. But what was really important was integrating it all. And notice how that overlaps. The blue arrow overlaps all the boxes and is going on all the time. That is really the critical process. Without that in place, sales and operations planning was never going to be successful. Therefore, there had to be an integrated reconciliation team, empowered by senior management to make some decisions, but participated and enable and align a strategy with operations. Facilitate the cross-functional collaboration that enables SNOP to work. Then guide the development of issues, opportunities, and decisions required by senior management, and shape the senior management review. That's the only way that management's going to make the right decisions at the right time with the right information. So he said, really, it's right to left. It doesn't start with a detail on the left-hand side. It starts with management taking the lead and driving the process. So we thought that was pretty important, and that's how we started implementing it. The first thing we did was get senior management to endorse the process, kick off the process, and even have the first sales and operations planning meeting without all the necessary information, but setting the expectations for the future. We said, this really ought to be a bi-directional process. Unfortunately, we did not know how to do this. We did recognize there had to be a strong financial involvement. We're trying to manage change over time, and we're trying to hit our business plans. So we need to see the financial implication of what is changing in our business. We need visibility to make decisions about the future. We also need more focus on return on investment. We all have shareholder expectations. We need to eliminate financial surprises. I had one controller that said, I've been with this company 35 years. This is the first time we've had a process that allowed us to eliminate financial surprises that typically would come about quarterly. We need a process to steer the ship. Now, what happened with DemandDriven is it came along and it changed the world. I think it's the most significant advancement in supply chain management in the last 50 years. And I go back, and I've been around long enough that I think I can make that claim. We've had problems with master scheduling and MRP and didn't even realize it. SNOP overcomes the need for accurate forecast, all the items to the SKU level. DemandDriven allows us to manage the aggregate. We can adapt to demand supply variability, and we need less inventory to improve customer service. DemandDriven has changed everything for me. It's changed how we're going to look at planning and execution of the future. Not going to happen overnight, but the change will be dramatic as companies realize what a demand-driven adaptive enterprise can be. Companies have many compliant and have MRP or DDMRP software suppliers to choose from, unlike how we looked at MRP in the 60s when there was no software, and there was no software to support master scheduling until 1971. And Carol and Chad, excuse me, with the DemandDriven Institute, have brought me out of retirement to help them present a complete solution, include Adaptive S&OP as part of this DemandDriven Adaptive Enterprise. To talk more about the Adaptive Enterprise, I'd like to turn it over to Carol. Carol?
Great. Thanks so much, Dick. And this is really important because, is a lot of people believe that we have that ability to, come on, you. There we go. that sales and operations planning was really just all about supply demand balancing, and it really isn't. It's really management's handle on the business. So, let's look at where we're at. What is that demand-driven adaptive enterprise model? Well, what that does is it focuses on the protection and promotion of flow. Well, the flow of what? Well, the flow of relevant information and materials. Well, why is that important? Well, this goes back to, George Plazel, another colleague of Dick's and mine back in the early days. And you never heard George speak that he didn't say that all benefits were directly related to the speed of flow. So it's the flow of relevant information and materials to drive something that's very important. And as Dick said, not only does financials need to be involved, that it's all about the financial return on the company. And I think back now to when I was APICS president in the year 2000, and it was pretty arrogant talking about how we were going to get senior managers to take supply chain management classes so they could speak our language. The reality is we needed to speak their language. Supply chain professionals need to speak the language of senior management, which is the language of return on investment. So we need to be able to have that conversation. We have earned our place at the board table, and we need that from a perspective of supply chain. So what about the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model? Well, it spans three ranges of the organization, three different relevant time ranges. One's operational, what we're doing this minute, this hour. To the tactical is how do we look forward and backwards, as well as the strategic range. And the critical thing on the tactical range, for years what we've attempted to do is tie the tactical range and the operational range directly together with an inappropriate use of the master schedule. It was never intended to handle both of those ranges. So what's the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model about? Well, it allows an organization to adapt. And there's really only two choices that we have in business today, which is either we adapt or die, because we're living in these very complex, changing, and volatile circumstances today. So what is this VUCA world that we're in? Now, the first is volatile. Things are changing very, very quickly. I remember when I came off the road a year ago, March, my schedule was full for the rest of the year. Well, within about a week, my whole schedule was gone, just as so many other people's were. It's very volatile. It's changing very, very quickly. In the time that I was in Colombia, in only 4 days, the exchange rate for the Colombian peso to the US dollar changed by 40% in 4 days. It was an incredible thing to watch. It's uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen. Just about the time that we think we get some clarity, we realize that we really don't know what's going to happen. It's very complex. We've got a lot of connections to manage. We've got supply chains that have spread around the world, and we have more connections to manage than we've ever had to before. And in fact, the whole terminology of supply chain is really a misnomer. We took it from the operations side where our processes are linear, and we said, well, if I connect my operations to my supplier and my customer, and then out to my customer's customer and my supplier's supplier, I've got a chain. Well, supply chain has never been a chain. Supply chains have always been a network. And so it's important to understand that what we're managing is this connections around the world. And finally, ambiguous. This picture that we're seeing, we don't know if this is New York City or Johannesburg or if it's Paris. We think we see, but we really don't even understand what it is that we're looking at. So this is our new normal today. As the world started to shut down in 2020, the common belief by most managers is, well, we're just going to shut down and we're just going to stick our head in the sand until this thing is over. And then after the pandemic's over, then we can go back to the way things were. Well, this pandemic is just the latest in a whole string of this kind of disruptions. And it's not a matter of if this is going to happen again, it's when. And if you look back in history, from the pandemic to 2008 with the economic crisis and collapse here in the United States, 2001 with the 9/11 attack on the United States, and we just continue to go back further and further. So complexity and volatility, this VUCA world is our new normal today. All right, so if we look at what our supply chains were in 1965, about the time that, Dick was working on implementing requirements planning for Wilmot Castle Company. Now, here's your trivia for the day. The first place that a MRP system, now called MRP, was implemented for another company was in 1961, written by this young IBM systems engineer named Dick Ling. What was funny is that about 20 years later, fresh out of college, where did Carol Ptak go to work for her first job? Yeah, back to the Wilmot Castle Company. So Dick and I have been crossing paths our entire careers and really didn't know it. The funny part is that when I got there in the 1980s, we were still using the software that Dick had written in the 60s. So in 1965, it was very different. Where we are today is opposite. So our supply chains look very different, but all of our rules, all of our tools, and all of our processes were really basically developed in the 50s, codified in the 60s, and commercialized in the 70s when Joe Ehrlich wrote the book MRP. So MRP, our tools are still planning the same way it did 50 years ago. Well, how's that working for us? Well, if we consider where we were, let's just look in the last decade from 2010 to 2019. And this was done by Laura Cesari. This was an article that she wrote called Supply Chain Leaders Rearranging the Deck Chairs. And Laura does a great job on research. And if you look at 96% of public companies, supply chain excellence is sliding away. So what's the ultimate impact? Well, it's either we learn how to adapt or we die. And you can see our operating margins have deteriorated, our inventory turns have deteriorated, and it's not a far leap to say we either adapt or die. Well, let's go back to S&OP. In the same article, in just the last 4 years, from 2016 to 2019, you can see that in the number of people that thought that their S&OP was very effective has dramatically declined. And not effective has gone to 22%. And even neutral went from 28 to 44%. So when you consider S&OP is more important than it ever has been before, but companies distorted it. The body of knowledge was distorted. It has been taught as a linear process. It's been taught as a supply-demand balancing. Well, it wasn't that way when Dick invented it in 88 and wrote about it, and it most certainly is now. So how is it that we move forward? What's the future look like? Well, let's go back to the future again. George Plazel, where he said that all benefits are directly related to the speed of flow of materials and information. You never heard George speak that he didn't say this. When he wrote the second edition of Ehrlich's MRP, it was in that book. It's a golden nugget. We recognize as our flows that information flows backwards through the supply chain. Materials flows forward through the supply chain. Information flows forward through the supply chain. Cash flows backwards through the supply chain. Well, when flow is occurring, what happens? Well, we get good service. We all know that, is that, we're even in the line for our coffee or going to go into a restaurant, that when the system flows well, we have good service and it's reliable. Well, when we have good service, then customers want to do business with us. They don't leave because customers have reduced tolerance times and how much they'll put up with before they will go ahead and go someplace else. Now, here's the one that should shock you. When good flow is occurring, I get good service, I've maximized and protected my revenue, but I've minimized my inventory, which flies in the face of every inventory optimization out there that says the assumption is to have better customer service, I have to have more inventory. Well, that's unequivocally false. To have better flow, I end up with better service and lower inventories at the same time. And anybody that's had any experience with Lean knows this because they've seen this. But the problem has been is that we haven't been able to take Lean to the systemic level. So we've been stuck in this multi-echelon inventory optimization. And then in addition, we also know that when we have good flow, we have our minimal expenses. And so our costs go down when we have good flow. And finally, the last incredibly important flow of supply chain, it's cash flow. So cash flow follows the rate of our product flow to our market demand. So a company can be incredibly profitable and go out of business because they run out of cash. And so that's a critical thing. So I would submit to you that if we protect and we promote flow, we maximize return on investment, and return on investment is really the objective of any for-profit company. Now, a lot of people, when I ask the question, what's the goal of the company? Well, they've read Ellie's book and they'll say make money, but that's not what he said. He said make money now and into the future. And what's the metric? The metric is ROI. So let's introduce the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model. As Dick said, there's three ranges. We've got the operational relevant range, which is where DDMRP sits. DDMRP is not the be-all and end-all. It is not the end destination. DDMRP is merely the first step. It's the gear that's inside the operating model. And without DDMRP, well, frankly, none of the rest of this works. So Chad and I, we created DDMRP. We actually codified a lot of what Chad and his team was doing with their innovation, because the reality was, yes, I created the term demand-driven manufacturing and the vision for it while I was at PeopleSoft. But just like Dick and Andy didn't know how to do something they had created, I had no clue how to pull it off either. And it was Chad Smith and his team that created the innovation that became DDMRP. So as we wrote Orlicky's third edition and we started to codify what DDMRP was, what we quickly realized that there had to be an SNOP component. And we reached out to Dick and Andy and asked them if they'd write an appendix in the book. And I've known Dick, about 40 years by this time, because I met him the first time as a young programs chair for our local SAPICS chapter. And I picked Dick up at the airport one day, and I think I must have asked him 200 questions on the way to the hotel. And I called Dick up and I said, would you write an appendix? And his answer came back very quickly. He said, no, we won't. He said, because we've gone so far beyond what traditional and what's being taught as SNOP, and it's totally different. And I said, I think we need to talk. And so the four of us got on a call together, and we realized that we had come together as yin and yang. That DDMRP answered the bidirectionality issue that Dick and Andy had identified in sales and operations planning. And then from a demand-driven perspective, to be able to adapt that operating model required sales and operations planning. So it was a yin and yang that came together. And so we talked Dick out of retirement, and we've kept him working all these years. Somebody that's 84 years old is usually retired sitting on the couch, but we haven't allowed him. We've been making him work really, really hard. So that operating model then has something that it ties to it called tactical reconciliation that we call DD-SNOP. Now, that's not SNOP with DD in front of it. It's really a functionally new part of sales and operations planning. This is the bidirectional tactical reconciliation hub inside the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model. This is what adapts the operating model. And for the first time now, the operational tools and the tactical tools are very distinctly separate. So no longer no MPS. All right. Why? Because we don't need it. Because what is an MPS? It's a statement of what I can and will build. But with DDMRP, now I can build what I can and will sell. And it allows me a range of capability so that I can tie that range of capability to the range coming from sales and operations planning. That's only possible with that tactical reconciliation called DD-SNOP. And of course, the overall oversight has to be done by Adaptive S&OP, the strategic relevant range, where we're going to look out as far as we need to where all of our costs and all of our capacity becomes variable. Well, that's being driven outside of our system, not computer system, our management system, by market-driven innovation. What is the desired future reality that we'd like to drive our company to? And on the other side, we can see actual demand is driving the operating model. So we are building what it is that our market really wants. So this model is both left to right and right to left, outside in and inside out. So it's all that together. So the relevant ranges, the operating model handles the operational relevant range. Tactical reconciliation handles that tactical relevant range, which looks backwards a full cumulative lead time, looks forward a full cumulative lead time. And then the strategic relevant range starts at a full cumulative lead time into the future and goes out to where everything becomes variable. The metric suite has to support. The most devastating thing of trying to implement flow is to still have cost-based metrics in place. And the worst is actually balanced scorecard, because right in the name, we've done terrible things to our people because what we're asking them to do is find some kind of compromise between the two positions where we really want to be at. We have to have flow-based metrics that don't cause variability, don't exacerbate variability, and that tie directly to return on investment. So let's go to Adaptive S&OP. What is Adaptive S&OP? Well, let's drill into it, double click, if you will. Well, you can see on the right, we've got our market-driven innovation. On the left, it outputs a business plan, an adaptive business plan to DD-S&OP. And as Dick said, here's that strategic integrated reconciliation, the most critical part of the adaptive S&OP process, accomplished by the strategic integrated reconciliation team, and they create the agenda for the management business review. So what does the strategic integrated reconciliation team integrate? Well, it looks at our go-to-market strategy, our operational strategy, our financial strategy. So we have to look at 3 dimensions. We've got to look at our governance. What expectations do we have for financials? What's our human resource? And we look at all the other governments, the legal, the strategic. We look at the market potential. What's available to us if we could fulfill all the market potential? How big is our market? And then what is our strategic capability? In other words, how is our company going to go to market? How do we create that market pull? So by integrating those 3 areas, we come up with an adaptive business plan that is then fed to DD-S&OP, and DD-S&OP then translates that into the operating model. We create the scenarios. We make several passes through the scenario. The first pass being an unconstrained pass. If we could deliver everything that's in the market, what would that look like? And then we constrain it. Where does that look like? And then how do we maximize our ROI given our constraints? So it's a multiple pass process until we identify those things that really need to be brought up to the management business review. So now let's drill into DD-S&OP. Well, DD-S&OP, the output is the master settings. And it's the master settings for the demand-driven operating model. It's where the positioning of the strategic buffers are going to be. How are they going to be sized? How are we going to dynamically change them? Those are the master settings. But at the same time, we need to understand how our past performance has looked. Because our near-term future is going to look a bit like our most near-term past. So we're not going to see a step function change in performance. And I've seen graphs like that where we look historically and then somebody says, oh, a miracle's going to occur. Well, I believe in miracles, but not there. So this past performance also feeds into our demand-driven operating model configuration. Now, what comes out of Adaptive S&OP is that adaptive business plan. Well, what's included in that is the tactical inputs include what our demand looks like. What do we think that demand's going to look like? Because we've already done our scenarios in Adaptive S&OP, figured out where our capacity constraint is. How is it that we're going to maximize our ROI? And out comes our demand plan. We also have our budgetary range. Now, this is really critical because sales and operations planning has always been about managing range. But that's impossible when the output of sales and operations planning is an NPS. Because an NPS is a single number for a single SKU for a single timeline. And any change causes a great deal of system nervousness all the way below it. So we need to have the ability to take a range and tie it to a range of capability, which is now possible with demand-driven. What's our capability definition? Are we going to be a make-to-stock company? Are we going to deliver immediately? Are we going to be more about increasing the variety with less volume per each? What is it? What is our claim in our marketplace? And then finally, what's our performance targets? What is it, the expectations for operations? So with those 4 tactical inputs, then go into the demand-driven operating model configuration, those first 3 steps of DDMRP. Well, what comes back? You can see this back arrow coming back from this tactical exploitation, where what we've got is that we have the opportunity that when we expose capacity, what do we do with it? All right, how is it that we can fill capacity that isn't going to impact already what's the bottleneck? It's what Ellie used to refer to as free capacity. So how do we increase our ROI? Then also coming back from the DDOM configuration are strategic recommendations that are out of the realm of approval of the DD-S&OP team that need leadership approval, as well as some tactical model projections that need immediate escalation to senior management. We used to have the luxury of having a full cumulative lead time in the future to introduce any changes. Well, that most certainly has changed with the pandemic. We saw companies that had to pivot within a very short period of time to just survive. As restaurants closed, how they pivoted to delivery or pickup. Grocery stores, to keep people out of the store, were now allowing you to order your groceries online, and then you could just come in and pick them up. So these were all changes that handled within that cumulative lead time because of the necessity, the immediate escalation of what had to happen, right, to survive with this onset of the pandemic. And it's been interesting to see how many new business models have been introduced. Here in my town, we've had more food trucks now where you can go up to a food truck instead of going into a restaurant. So there's been lots of opportunities as well as a lot of crisis in these last 2 years. So what are those capability master settings that we're getting out of DD-S&OP? Well, we need to be concerned about new product introduction. How do we introduce a product such that we achieve the objectives that senior management has given to us for it? How do we manage seasonal fluctuations? Do we have the capacity to be able to handle that surge during season? If we don't, then we need to build anticipation inventory, which has got to tie into our financial analysis to understand that we're going to be increasing our working capital in anticipation of the season. But which products are we going to build? Well, of course, we're going to build our runners. We're going to build the parts that we know that we're going to sell, so that during season, we're building the strangers and the lower volume products. How about a major promotion? We need to know about this ahead of time. Now, the good news with DDMRP is those buffers will start to adapt based on actual consumption. And so if, say, marketing does pull a promotion that they don't let us know about, there's an early warning system that something has changed. But ideally, we'd like to know about promotion so that we know we have an anticipated change up or down in demand. Things that we know about our business that we have to proactively manage and change the operating model. Those all require special input parameters into the DDOM. This is management's handle on the business. The advantage is that for every choice, there's a consequence. And the advantage of the demand-driven operating model is it allows us a path from a scenario to calculate the consequence. So that updates our ADUs and it updates our buffers so that our planners are planning according to what is the strategy and that we're complying to the model as it's been set up. So as I said, supply chains are not chains. They never have been linear. Supply chains are complex adaptive systems. As we look at managing a complex adaptive systems, there's 3 dimensions. There's emergence, selection, and feedback. And that's how every adaptive system works. And whether it's biological in nature, Mother Nature tends to be rather cataclysmic on how she does her selections. If you don't adapt, you die. And it's always interesting, a lot of people say that, the gentleman that did the work, Darwin down in, off the coast of Ecuador said the theory of evolution. He never said it. He talked about adaptation. And it's always interesting when people talk about, animals and what that's called the teleological manner, that giraffes decided to grow a long neck so they could eat the leaves on the top of the trees. Well, they didn't. It's called scarce food. The only food they had was in a tree. The animals with the longest necks survived, and the ones that had shorter necks died. All right? And so it's how Mother Nature takes care of things. But it's the same way in any complex adaptive system. And this does come out of the field of biology, but it applies to every complex adaptive system that we manage. Anything in a company is a complex adaptive system. We're surrounded by complex adaptive systems. Every system is part of another system, but it has to have a limit of what our effective control is. But we always manage with these intersecting loops. And there was a great book that was written by General Stanley McChrystal. He was an American general, and he was in Iraq and fighting the terrorists over there. And the problem that he had is that he had to be both agile as well as have chain of command and be organized. So he used the idea of complex adaptive systems of being able to have selection feedback and emergence loops. So it's the same way in managing a supply chain. So what the DDOM does is it takes the emergence in the tactical selection, this tactical adaptive loop, into the operating model and provides feedback to DDS&OP. So it's a closed loop. At the same time, Adaptive S&OP manages the strategic adaptive loop, where we have our strategic selection. Strategy must be affected by operational capability, and operational capability must be aligned with strategy. It is a bi-directional process. And you can see that this looks like an infinite loop, and it is, because what the demand-driven model really is a continuous improvement process. So we get this emergence of new ideas that our DDS&OP helps us understand with feedback of what that choice means, what's the consequence, so that senior managers can make a more informed choice. Right or wrong, they can make a more informed choice. I can present to senior management that choice means this, and if they choose to go down that road, that's part of their job. So it's interconnecting adaptive loops. Well, let's fill in the other dimension. How do we adapt the whole enterprise? And this is what sales and operations planning is really all about. It's management's handle on the business. So from Adaptive S&OP, we get the manager business review decisions with the tactical inputs, which also provides emergence back into the Adaptive S&OP loop and also ties back into DDS&OP. So we've got these multiple loops going on at the same time, but the hub and the wheel is the piece that we've been missing, a piece that Dick has called the missing link, which is this bidirectional tactical reconciliation. The first time we've been able to connect strategy to operations, operations to strategy with a very well-made wide bridge, not a tiny wire that the MPS represented. Okay, a bridge, a bidirectional bridge that can be constantly reconciled in that bidirectional fashion. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dick, and you might say, well, what's changed versus what has not changed? So Dick, back to you.
You just need to unmute.
And Dick, you've got yourself on mute. There you go.
Sorry about that. I had myself on
You've got
mute.
yourself muted, Dick, if you can take yourself off of mute.
I can hear you now.
Oh. Dick, you're still muted.
I'm not muted. I'm online now. So what has not changed with sales and operations planning?
Dick, click your microphone at the bottom to enable your microphone. You're still muted.
I can hear him.
No, it doesn't show that. I'm not muted.
It's in your very bottom menu bar. There you go.
Am I back live? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Carry on.
Okay. So what has not changed with sales and operations planning? We need a strong portfolio management process. We need the integrated reconciliation, strong financial integration. The documented assumptions are still essential, and the whole thing has to be driven by senior management. But some things have changed. There's much more focus on aggregate planning rather than SKU forecasting. The tactical integrated reconciliation that's provided by DDS&OP is crucial to reconciling the plan for the future with the current reality. And we have introduced strategic integrated reconciliation, which is really the process that's being used to help discern what the future should look like. And therefore, we end up with a bidirectional process, which we thought about 25 years ago, but couldn't do without the DDOM and without a demand-driven enterprise. So what does this model look like? I would say that the demand-driven operating model is the ultimate demand pull mechanism. The tactical reconciliation is done by DD S&OP, and then, excuse me, cross-functional planning and management driving the process is done with Adaptive S&OP. And this is a very important slide because some people say, I just want to implement Adaptive S&OP. Well, first of all, you have to have a DDMRP inside the DDOM. That's got to be in place. You've either got to implement S&OP fundamentals or assess and improve your current process. You enable DDS and OP, very important and critical to the process, and achieve the bidirectional communication. Therefore, you become adaptive, and that's important. By doing all these things, you become adaptive. You just don't implement Adaptive S&OP. So what's different today that will enable companies to adopt S&OP, Adaptive S&OP? Well, S&OP is more of a mainstream process than it was when we introduced it back in the 1980s. ASCM collaborates with IBF and conducts an annual Best of S&OP conference. I'm hoping that will start to talk about Adaptive S&OP. There'll be education, and software companies will provide the tools to implement. This did not exist back in the 80s again. Companies won't have to rely on fragile Excel spreadsheets to support their implementations. I wish that I'm going to be around to see it all happen. But as Carol said, I'm 84 years old. I'm loving what I'm doing. I really enjoy working with Carol and Chad, and I'm very excited about the future. And I'm very grateful that DDI brought me out of retirement to help get the momentum going with the Adaptive S&OP process. So here's the current definition we have for sales and operations planning. And I'm going to read it very slowly so you all take it in. Sales and operations planning is an integrated business planning process that provides planning ability to strategically direct its businesses to achieve competitive advantage on a continuous basis by production and promotion of return on investment. Product innovation, customer-focused marketing plans, new existing products, operations strategy, and the financial strategy are managed on a continuous basis by an integrated reconciliation team to enable the company to sense, adapt, and innovate successfully across the supply chain. That's quite a change from that initial definition that I shared with you early in the presentation. And I'd like to turn it back over to Carol, who's going to wrap up our session.
Great. I'm hoping that my audio is back. Unfortunately, I could not hear Dick. So let's finish up here. I'm going to try to see if I've got feedback on audio. I guess we got it. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that feedback. So let's look at our sales and operations planning definition. I'm going to overlay where Dick just left off. We're back to the future. Dick introduced S&OP as an integrated planning process that was management's handle on the business. So how do we do this? How do we sense, adapt, and innovate across the supply chain? How do we get started? Well, first is to understand where we are. Today in our companies, we're trapped. We're focused on our cost-based operational efficiency. We're in conflict. We've got cost reduction and responsiveness, and we go back and forth. And we're trying to find that, that compromise between the two positions that allows us to win. And we're in a no-win. So it's moving to stage 2, where we try something different. And it's a change of a planning methodology. That sounds like a crazy place to start the transformation of a business, but it's where it starts. We start with DDMRP. So we begin to emphasize our flow-based operational efficiency with the implementation of DDMRP. Now that gives us some great results. Inventory's gone down a third to a half, on time in full is going up, and a lot of people are fixated on DDMRP. But that's not the end of the story. We need to then finish up with the demand-driven operating model with planning, execution, and a kind of finite scheduling for control points. This gives us our operational range. So now we've got control of operations. And now, how do we adapt? This is where SNOP comes in, with a company that has somewhat of an operating model running. We leverage the operating model capability across the enterprise and into the market. And we've now implemented DDS&OP, which is that bidirectional hub that's allowing me to translate strategy to operations and operations back to strategy. We've now integrated into our Adaptive S&OP process, where our senior management team are making decisions based on facts, evidence, and data supported by documented assumptions. And then we get to the fun part, being able to sense and adapt and innovate across our supply chain, that we drive to our created future. And now what we're looking for is a continued return on investment improvement. So if we leave you one last thought, I think it's this. Thoughtware. Before you invest in hardware and software, before you invest in consultants, invest in education. Have people understand what and why you're doing. In all the videos that are available on our website of all the case studies, and the lessons learned, the first one has always been, we should have done more education, because we have to be able to think systemically. If we can't think systemically, then we cannot look for distortions to relevant information. And ROI is directly related to the flow of relevant information at the systemic level, which means that we're incapable of thinking and adapting for flow. And it's all about flow. So ensuring and maintaining that framework for the 4 prerequisites of relevant information is the primary job of senior management. It's defining the relevant ranges. It's defining the metrics. It's having this bidirectional tactical reconciliation so that we can successfully run our business. So DDS&OP and Adaptive S&OP, as Dick explained, lots of things have stayed the same. Lots of things have changed. But now we have a sales and operations planning process for what it was originally intended. Business management's handle on the business. The ability to create our desired future, react to the current reality that we're in. And that's why I love a quote that Dick introduced me to from Jim Stockton. Stockton was the highest ranking officer in the United States military that was incarcerated during Vietnam. And it wasn't the optimistic guys that survived those horrible years of captivity. It wasn't the pessimistic ones. It was the ones, as Jim Stockdale said, that believed that in the overall future they would get out, but they had to embrace the terrible reality of where they were. And that's what S&OP is about. What future do we want to create? And how do we deal with the reality that's been dealt with us so that we can sense, adapt, and innovate for the future? So please feel free to contact us. There's our email addresses, and we would love to have that conversation with you. I think we got time. Any questions have come in?
Carol, yeah, thank you very much. And Dick, let me have a look in the discussion here. Okay, there's one question here. Is there a place for popular AI, ML, and OR techniques within DDOM and Adaptive S&OP? For example, can some of these tools be used to determine further improvement responsiveness within a demand-driven planning environment?
If that's okay, Dick, I'll take this one since I've been involved with the software company in developing this. Absolutely, yes. And this is the critical part of DDS&OP, is being able to create those scenarios and understand what the impact of those scenarios are, and also adapting the buffers because the buffers, since you're operating with a buffer, you're operating to a range. And what a range does is you have a nominal and you have an upper and lower control limit. And what AI and machine learning, all these techniques do is they're based on the same science that demand-driven is based on, which is complex adaptive systems. And we have a university here in Arizona that's done extensive research in complex adaptive systems. They said, well, we've got all this research, but we're really not quite sure what to do with it. And I said, let me show you. And they're very excited because the idea of managing a supply chain as a complex adaptive system now opens up the use of AI and machine learning like never before, because they're based on the same science. So it's how the buffers are adapted, where the buffers are positioned, how do we maximize our ROI, being able to evaluate different scenarios and do it much quickly. And doing that with simulation software is very exciting, and I'm privy to some of the software companies and what they're working on that they haven't released yet, and it's a very interesting future. The two really fit together well, really like a hand in a glove. Attempting to do it manually before is now possible, but it's because it shares the same science. Why it is a complex adaptive system, and that you're managing to a range, which is what AI and ML does a very, very good job at. So that positioning and sizing and adaptation is really critical, and it fits very, very well. And I'll just give you a heads up, there's some very exciting innovations coming out from some of the software companies.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. And yeah, you're right. We're working on some AI and machine learning algorithms that are going to help improve the demand-driven materials requirements planning. We don't seem to have any more questions. So I'd just like to thank Carol and Dick for coming along this afternoon, talking about the Adaptive S&OP. Just a reminder, the videos of all the presentations will be available to everybody on this platform until the end of the weekend. After that, they're going to be downloaded and put on the SAPICS YouTube channel. If you want to know more about DDMOP, Demand-Driven Technologies is sponsoring a Flow Sim game in September. There are only 36 places available. So if you want to get involved in that, go to the SAPICS website, go to the events tab, and you can find out more about that flow simulation game. Don't forget to go to the polls on the right-hand side there and score this particular presentation. And yeah, I hope to see you all at the quiz at 4:15. And the link for that quiz is actually in the discussion tab on the right-hand side. So thanks very much, Carol and Dick. Tanya, I think I'm handing over to you now. Did I see Tanya here somewhere?
Tanya's here.
Yep,
I'm
there
here.
you are.
Thank you, Ken. Hello, Carol. If you're still here and you can still hear me, it's good to virtually see you.
Thank you, Tanya. Good to see you too.
I didn't get to listen to your presentation. I'm sorry, but we've been doing some things here in the background. But next time. So I am not very clear. I appear to be a bit dark. Anyway, we have come to the point in the program where we would normally be all in the exhibition hall now, gathering around for the prizes and the awarding of the prizes, which is the exciting part for the people that have entered. So let me tell you, the people that had awarded prizes or had competitions going, for those of you that attended the Easy Access, oh, listen to my English. Those of you that entered the Easy Access competition, the winner will be contacted directly by Easy Access post-conference. I'd like to call on Herman Hart, the Vice President of CHEP Sub-Saharan Africa, to do the prize award for the CHEP competition. So, Herman, if you would like to say a few words there.
Thank you, Tanya. First of all, I just want to thank SAPICS and UPAVN for hosting a really fantastic SAPICS event once again. Surely we had our challenges and all the rest, but once again, a fantastic event. And then thank you for everybody that took part of our little quiz. Hopefully you learned something about our sustainability goals for 2025. The answers just was we want to plant 2 trees for every tree utilized. We want to collaborate with 500 customers globally, and we want to feed 10 million people by FY25. So those were the answers. Tanya, I think you've got all the names in the hat there. If you can pull out a name and we can see who the winner is.
Okay, well, so it doesn't matter if the winner's here or not, but it would be very nice for the winner to be here. Okay, so the pressure. Okay, let me see who I have here. Renee Cornish from Spa. Renee, are you in the audience? Can you drop us a message in the Discuss chat if you are here?
So just to say, Renee, we do have your email address, and we will forward you a 5,000 Rand gift voucher shortly on email. And then I'd just like to announce a further thing. CHEP is going to donate for every participant at this conference, which is around 500, I believe. We're going to donate 500 fruit trees to Christel House. That's a school that CHEP supports here in Cape Town, doing fantastic work, providing quality education to underprivileged kids, really making a massive difference. And these fruit trees sort of also links into our sustainability. It's part of the curriculum, and we're going to donate those fruit trees to the school. So another initiative that we will be doing. So thank you for the opportunity, and hope you all had a good time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman. And yeah, I mean, CHEP have got a big sustainability drive, and they do wonderful, wonderful work with that. So it is wonderful to hear that you're going to be doing the fruit trees, and that you continue to practice what you preach, basically.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for that, Herman. Okay, so then I have been given the privilege of announcing the Gospel Prize as well. So they had done the draw themselves, and they've handed me the name. So, and I wish I could have a drum roll now. So the winner of that prize of 10,000 rands in cash, can I see some applause here for all this? This is a great way to end the day. And the winner of that is, and I really hope that they're in the audience, because I wish the previous prize winner had been in the audience, but it's not always the case, is Vanya Janssen from Pepcore Trading. Vanya, are you in the audience? Can you show, give us a discussion, hello or something there? I'll be very disappointed if there's nobody. Oh! Okay, Vanya's in the audience. Congratulations. Thank you. We will reach out to you to get the details, and we will send you that, we will wire you that money, so to speak. So these have been fantastic prizes, and we thank all the exhibitors for that, the ones that have done the competitions and the extra work that they've put in. It's really not easy to, how can I say, to exhibit and the like in this type of platform. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of extra work to try and do it. So really, really well done to our exhibitors. And I just want to say a few thanks. And I won't drag it out, because I know when everybody gets to the end of this, they've kind of had enough and they want to wrap it up. So on behalf of SAPICS, I would like to say a very big thank you to, firstly, our sponsors. So it's Accenture as our principal sponsor. We thank you so much for your support. Easy Access, OpenText, SAS as our diamond sponsors. CHEP, DemandDriven, Gospel for your sponsors as silver sponsors. Imperial, that sponsored the Women's Day event primarily, and Locus and Tracker, that were a gold sponsor. So we really appreciate your support, and I know that times are difficult, and it's very difficult to commit to a virtual event and expect not the same return, but given the times and the circumstances, we appreciate that, you know, every cent helps, but it's much appreciated by SAPICS. We really do value your support through these difficult times, and especially where we've got customers that we've had for such a long time, like CHEP, I think 25 years in the making, very long relationship or a long marriage. And the new companies that have come on board that are supporting SAPICS, we look forward to a lot more interaction through you in the coming years. A big thank you to OpenText for the cartoon artist. I hope that you've all managed to get your picture drawn, especially as you could have asked him to remove a few lines here and there to give you a more youthful look. That's definitely the approach I took, and I was quite pleased with the results. And as I've said, the exhibiting part is really not easy at all. We want to thank the exhibitors for their hard work, the speakers for their time, and of course our delegates for entrusting us with your professional development, and we hope that we didn't disappoint. I would like to believe that our program was exceptional and we had incredible content and speakers for you. So if you believe in that, if you can give me a show of hands, if you thought that the content was spot on and you enjoyed the program that we offered you. And of course, we'll send out a survey after the conference and get your feedback. It's very important for us and for you as delegates so that we know what to give you in future. And a big thank you to the Uphaven Management and SAPICS team for yet another excellent conference. And I know that I am part of the SAPICS team, but I definitely don't do all the work, a fraction of the work. There is an incredible team that works long hours and does lots of hard work to bring this conference to you. And you may think that because it's virtual, it's easier. I promise you it's not. It comes with a whole lot of different stress. So the team behind that does all this and supports it and has managed to put together an exceptional online event, thank you for always getting it right. And I think that the people that attend the conference and support it will thank you as well. So if we can get a quick round of applause for the team, I'm sure they'd be very, very grateful, because I'm sure they've got very sore eyes and probably lots of headaches after 3 days of staring at a screen. And I think lastly, but definitely not least, we would like to make sure that all of you know that the 12th to the 15th of June 2022, we are having our annual conference, and we are hoping that this time in June next year we will be in Cape Town in person having our event, so that we can sit together and have coffee, we can have a gala dinner, we can do all the things that we really, really miss doing, and see each other in person and catch up and spend some time together. So we've enjoyed your company virtually. We've had fun over the last 3 days, and we certainly look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you for support. Take care, and we will see you sooner or later at one of our virtual events. If not, then definitely at SAPICS 2022. Thank you once again. Take care, and I'll see you all at the quiz. Let's test all those brains. Thank you.